My name is Amelia Carter. I'm 24 years old, and I'm currently finishing my master's degree in international business at one of the top universities in New York. Most people who meet me think I've had a perfect life. They see my confidence, my education, and the expensive clothes I wear now, and they assume I grew up surrounded by love and comfort. They couldn't be more wrong. If you had met me 10 years ago, you would have seen a quiet little girl standing outside her own house, wondering why her own mother looked at her like she didn't belong. My father passed away when I was only 8 years old. After that day, everything changed. Before Dad died, our home was full of laughter. My mother smiled. We ate dinner together every night. She used to call me her little princess. But after his funeral, it felt like she buried her love for me beside him. At first, I thought she was grieving. Then weeks turned into months. Months became years. And eventually, I realized something painful. She didn't just lose her husband. She had decided to lose her daughter too. Every mistake I made became an excuse for her anger. If I got an A in school, she'd ask why it wasn't an A+. If I cleaned the house, she'd point out the one corner I missed. If relatives praised me, she'd immediately embarrass me in front of everyone. "You think you're special?" she'd whisper. "Don't forget whose house you're living in." Those words stayed with me for years. The hardest part wasn't the criticism. It was the silence. Birthdays came and went without hugs. Graduations passed without congratulations. Even when I won scholarships, she never looked proud. She simply nodded and walked away. When I turned 18, I moved into the university dormitory. Not because I wanted independence. Because I finally accepted something heartbreaking. Home wasn't home anymore. During college, I worked 2 part-time jobs. I studied until midnight. I skipped vacations. I saved every dollar. No one knew that some nights I cried myself to sleep. Not because life was difficult, but because I still wanted my mother to love me. Every birthday, I sent her flowers. Every Mother's Day, I mailed a handwritten letter. Every holiday, I called. Most of the time, she never answered. Years passed. My life slowly changed. An internship turned into an international opportunity. That opportunity became a successful career. I started working with one of the world's most respected investment groups. The company trusted me with projects worth millions of dollars. For the first time in my life, people respected my opinion. People listened when I spoke. People believed in me. Ironically, the only person who never did was my own mother. Then one morning, I received a phone call from an unknown number. It was my aunt. Her voice sounded nervous. "Amelia, your mother wants you to attend the Carter Foundation gala next Saturday." I almost laughed. My mother? Inviting me? After years of treating me like a stranger? Something didn't feel right. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. So I agreed. I had no idea. That one sentence spoken at the entrance of that luxurious event would change our lives forever. The moment my mother looked at the security guard, smiled politely, and said, "She's not my daughter, she's just my guest." She believed she had humiliated me for the last time. She had absolutely no idea what the gold seal on the black card inside my purse actually meant. The Carter Foundation Gala was the kind of event people dreamed of attending. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand ballroom, while photographers crowded behind velvet ropes, capturing every famous face that arrived. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities, and philanthropists filled the marble lobby, exchanging smiles that looked genuine only from a distance. As my taxi stopped outside the hotel, I looked through the window for a moment. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. Years of rejection had taught me that expecting love only led to disappointment. Still, somewhere deep inside me, a tiny voice whispered the same childish hope it always had. Maybe tonight will be different. I stepped out of the taxi wearing a simple yet elegant navy blue evening gown. It wasn't covered in diamonds or designer logos, but it reflected exactly who I had become. Someone who no longer needed expensive labels to prove her worth. I walked toward the entrance, where I immediately spotted my mother. She stood among several wealthy guests in a sparkling silver dress, laughing comfortably as though she had never spent years pretending I didn't exist. When our eyes met, her smile disappeared. For a second, neither of us moved. Finally, I walked toward her. "Hi, Mom." She looked me up and down before forcing a polite smile. "You actually came. I thought you invited me." "I did." There was an awkward silence. Before I could say anything else, she glanced behind me. "Where's your husband?" "I'm not married." "Oh. What about your boyfriend?" "I don't have one." She nodded slowly, almost as if I had confirmed something she had already assumed. "I see." Then she leaned closer. "You really should have brought someone. Most people here don't come alone." I smiled politely. "I've learned to stand on my own." She ignored the comment. Instead, she adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist and said, "Stay close tonight. I don't want you embarrassing me." Those words shouldn't have hurt anymore. But somehow, they still did. We walked toward the security checkpoint together. The hotel had extremely tight security because several international investors were attending the gala. Every guest had to verify their invitation before entering. When our turn came, the head security guard smiled respectfully. "Good evening, ma'am. May I confirm your guests?" My mother handed him her invitation. Then the guard looked at me. "And this young lady?" For a brief second, I waited. Not because I expected anything extraordinary. I simply hoped that this one time, she would introduce me as her daughter. Instead, without hesitation, she smiled politely and said, "Oh, she's not my daughter." The words hit me harder than I expected. The guard looked confused. "So she's my guest. Just my guest. Nothing more. Not my child. Not my family. Not even my daughter. Just a guest." I felt as though the entire lobby had gone silent. People nearby glanced in our direction. Some looked uncomfortable. Others pretended not to notice. I stared at my mother, waiting for her to laugh and say she was joking. She never did. Instead, she looked at me with the same cold expression I had seen since childhood. For the first time in years, something inside me stopped breaking. It simply stopped caring. The security guard apologized politely. "I'm sorry, miss, but I'll also need to verify your invitation." Of course. I reached into my purse. The invitation was there. But so was something else. A matte black card with an elegant gold seal embossed in the center. I hadn't planned to use it. In fact, almost nobody ever saw it. Because it wasn't a credit card. It wasn't a membership card. It was an executive authorization card issued only to a handful of global partners of the investment group I worked for. Most people didn't even know such a card existed. I handed my invitation to the guard first. He scanned it. The machine beeped. Verified. Then, as I returned the invitation to my purse, the black card slipped from my fingers and landed on the marble floor. The gold seal caught the light. The security guard instinctively bent down to pick it up. The moment he looked at it, his expression completely changed. His confident smile disappeared. His eyes widened. He looked at the card. Then at me. Then back at the card again. His hands actually trembled. "Miss." His voice had become almost a whisper. Is this yours?" Yes. You are Ms. Amelia Carter? I am. For several long seconds. He simply stared. Then, without another word, he pressed a discreet button hidden beneath the security desk. A soft alert sounded inside the building. Within moments, 2 additional security officers approached. My mother folded her arms impatiently. What is taking so long? No one answered her. Instead, the head guard stood perfectly straight. Then, to everyone's complete surprise, he respectfully lowered his head toward me. Ma'am, please accept our sincere apologies. The lobby became silent. People stopped walking. Guests turned around. Even photographers lowered their cameras. My mother's face tightened. What exactly is going on? The guard swallowed nervously. Ma'am. He wasn't speaking to my mother anymore. He was speaking to me. There has been a misunderstanding. I remained calm. I don't believe so. No, ma'am, there has. He carefully handed me the black card with both hands. We were not informed that one of the foundation's global executive trustees would be arriving tonight. The words echoed through the lobby. Global executive trustee. Several businessmen nearby exchanged shocked looks. One elderly investor suddenly recognized the gold seal. His eyes widened. Wait. He whispered to the man beside him. That's the executive gold seal. The whisper spread astonishingly fast. People who had ignored me only moments earlier were now staring in disbelief. My mother looked from my face to the card. Then back to the security guard. I think you've made a mistake. The guard answered respectfully but firmly. We never mistake this seal. He turned toward me again. The chairman specifically instructed us that if any executive trustee arrived unexpectedly, they were to receive full protocol. Before I could respond, the hotel's general manager hurried into the lobby. His face was pale. Where is Ms. Amelia Carter? The guard pointed toward me. The manager immediately approached and extended both hands. Ms. Carter, welcome. It is an honor to finally meet you in person. Behind him, my mother's confident smile slowly disappeared. For the first time in my entire life, she looked at me. Not with disappointment. Not with anger. But with complete and utter disbelief. The silence inside the lobby lasted only a few seconds. But to my mother, it must have felt like an eternity. She looked at the hotel's general manager, then at the security guards, and finally back at me as though she were seeing a complete stranger. This has to be some kind of mistake, she said, forcing a nervous laugh. The general manager smiled politely. I'm afraid it isn't, Mrs. Carter. He turned toward me again. Ms. Carter, the chairman has been hoping to meet you in person for months. He didn't know whether your schedule would allow you to attend tonight. My mother blinked. The chairman wants to meet her? Yes. The chairman of the foundation? Personally. The color slowly drained from her face. For years, she had introduced me as the child who would never amount to anything. Now, one of the most respected organizations in the country was waiting for me. The irony was almost unbelievable. The manager gestured toward the private elevator. If you'll follow me, Ms. Carter, the executive reception is upstairs. I nodded politely. Then I stopped. I looked back at my mother. She was standing alone now. The same guests who had surrounded her just minutes earlier had quietly stepped away, whispering among themselves. She suddenly looked much smaller than before. For a brief moment, our eyes met. I could see confusion, pride, fear, and something else. Regret. But I simply smiled. After you, I said to the manager. As we entered the private elevator, the doors slowly closed. The last thing I saw was my mother standing completely frozen. The executive lounge on the top floor looked nothing like the crowded ballroom below. It was quiet, elegant, private. The people inside weren't celebrities. They were the people who quietly shaped industries, funded hospitals, built universities, and made decisions that affected thousands of lives. As I walked in, several executives stood to greet me. One elderly gentleman walked toward me with a warm smile. "Amelia. It's wonderful to finally meet you." I shook his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison." He laughed. "No, Mr. Harrison. Tonight you're one of us." The room filled with polite laughter. Someone handed me a glass of sparkling water. Another executive congratulated me on the education program I had recently launched for underprivileged students. One woman smiled and said, "I've read every report you've written. They're inspiring." I couldn't help smiling. These people respected me because of my work. Not because of my last name. Not because of my family. Because I had earned it. Meanwhile, downstairs, my mother was living through the longest 20 minutes of her life. Guests began approaching her. Not to congratulate her, but to ask questions. "You never mentioned your daughter. She's an executive trustee. I thought you said she worked a normal office job. Why did security call her ma'am?" Every question made her more uncomfortable. She tried to smile. She tried to change the subject. But the whispers kept growing. For years, she had carefully built an image of herself. Tonight, that image was falling apart. About 30 minutes later, the foundation's chairman walked onto the ballroom stage. The room immediately became silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin tonight's charity auction, I'd like to recognize someone whose generosity has changed countless lives." The giant screen behind him lit up. A photograph appeared. It was me. A quiet gasp spread through the ballroom. My mother stared at the screen in complete disbelief. The chairman continued. "Many people know our organization, but very few know the person responsible for funding over 60% of our international education scholarships during the past 3 years." The room erupted into whispers. She requested complete anonymity. She never wanted public recognition. She only asked for one thing: that every child who received a scholarship would believe their future mattered. My mother's hands began to shake. She looked around. People were no longer whispering about me. They were staring at her. The chairman smiled. "Please welcome Ms. Amelia Carter." The spotlight found me as I walked onto the stage. The applause started slowly. Then louder. Then louder still. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was standing. Hundreds of people applauded. Some smiled. Others wiped tears from their eyes after hearing the stories of students whose lives had been transformed. I looked across the audience. And there she was. My mother. Standing absolutely still. Not clapping. Not speaking. Just staring. I stepped to the microphone. For a few seconds, I said nothing. Then I smiled. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your kindness. I never imagined standing on a stage like this. When I was a little girl, I believed success meant making people proud. I spent years chasing approval. I thought if I studied harder, if I worked longer, if I became successful enough, someone would finally look at me and say, 'I'm proud of you.'" The ballroom became completely silent. But life taught me something much more valuable. Your worth is never decided by the people who fail to see it. It's decided by what you choose to become despite them. Several people nodded. Others quietly wiped away tears. I continued. "Every scholarship we fund is for one reason. So that no child ever believes they are less valuable because someone refused to love them." A wave of applause filled the room. I smiled. And tonight, I dedicate this award to every young person who has ever felt invisible. You are enough. You always were. The applause lasted nearly a full minute. When it finally settled, I looked directly toward my mother. Not with anger. Not with hatred. But with peace. For the first time in my life, I realized something. The greatest revenge was never humiliating the person who hurt you. The greatest revenge was becoming someone their rejection could never destroy. The applause slowly faded. I stepped away from the microphone, believing the evening was finally over. But life had one last chapter waiting for me. As I walked off the stage, I heard a trembling voice behind me. Amelia, please. For the first time in years, my mother wasn't giving me an order. She was asking. I turned around. The ballroom fell silent again. Hundreds of eyes followed us as she slowly walked toward me. The confident woman who had arrived at the gala was gone. Standing in front of me now was someone carrying years of regret. When she stopped only a few feet away, tears filled her eyes. I need to talk to you. I nodded. The chairman quietly signaled the orchestra to continue playing softly while we stepped into a private lounge beside the ballroom. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, she broke the silence. I owe you the truth. I folded my hands and waited. When your father died, I blamed you. Those words struck me harder than anything she had ever said before. I know it doesn't make sense, she whispered. The day your father had the accident, he was driving home because you had called him after school. I knew it wasn't your fault, but every time I looked at you, I remembered losing him. Instead of dealing with my grief, I pushed it onto you. A tear rolled down her cheek. I punished the only person who needed me most. For years, I had wondered why my mother's love disappeared overnight. Now I finally had an answer. It didn't erase the pain, but it explained it. She continued, her voice shaking. Every birthday I ignored, every graduation I missed, every cruel word I spoke. I've regretted them for years. But the longer I waited to apologize, the more ashamed I became. I convinced myself it was too late. She looked down at the floor. And tonight, when I told the guard you were just my guest, I realized I had become someone I never wanted to be. Silence filled the room. I took a slow breath. You know what hurt the most? She slowly looked up. It wasn't that you didn't believe in me. It was that I never stopped believing in you. Fresh tears streamed down her face. I sent flowers every Mother's Day. I wrote letters. I called. Not because you deserved it, but because I hoped one day I'd get my mother back. She covered her face with both hands and began crying. I'm so sorry, Amelia. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I can't erase the past. But if there's even the smallest place left in your heart, I'd like the chance to earn being your mother again. I stood there quietly. The little girl inside me had dreamed of hearing those words for 16 years. Now that they had finally come, they didn't heal everything, but they healed something. I gently reached into my purse and pulled out a small envelope. I was going to throw this away tonight. She looked confused. I handed it to her. She opened it carefully. Inside was an old photograph. It showed the three of us, Mom, Dad, and me, at a beach when I was 7 years old. Behind the picture, in my father's handwriting, were the words, "Take care of each other. Family is life's greatest treasure." My mother collapsed into tears. She held the photograph against her chest as if she never wanted to let go. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I'm so sorry. For the first time in years, I stepped forward. And I hugged her. Not because she had earned it. Not because everything was fixed. but because I refuse to let the pain define the rest of my life. Sometimes forgiveness isn't a gift for the person who hurt you. Sometimes it's the freedom you give yourself. A few months later, my mother started seeing a grief counselor. She volunteered at one of the education centers funded by the foundation. She never asked for recognition. She simply wanted to help. Our relationship didn't magically become perfect. Healing never works that way. Trust was rebuilt one conversation, one visit, one honest apology at a time. 1 year later, we stood together at another foundation event. This time, as we approached the entrance, the same head security guard smiled warmly. "Good evening, Mrs. Carter." "Good evening, Miss Carter." My mother smiled. Then she placed her hand gently on my shoulder. "No," she said proudly. "This is not my guest." She looked directly at me with tears of happiness in her eyes. "This is my daughter. And she is the greatest blessing I have ever been given." The guard smiled. "So wonderful to hear." As we walked inside, I looked up at the night sky and silently thought about my father. I hoped he could see us. Maybe, after all those years, our family had finally found its way home. Final message. Never let someone else's rejection define your value. Sometimes the people who fail to recognize your worth are the very ones who later realize they lost something priceless. Success may earn respect, but kindness, forgiveness, and resilience are what truly make a person unforgettable.